Good morning. Hello, everybody, to another, and welcome to another Modern Astrology Planets workshop. This is number 5. We're doing Mars today. We're halfway through this series of workshops. And we've got a lot of people coming today, so it must be going pretty well. That's the takeaway from that, I guess. Today, like I said, we're looking at Mars. And just before I started, I went to a book fair about, would have been about a year ago, at one of the universities, and they had a lot of books from different departments. And in the metaphysics department, there are quite a lot of old books on astrology. I picked this book up. It's by Sasha Fenton. It's called The Planets. And one of the things that she wrote about there when it came to Mars, that was in a woman's chart, Mars can indicate the type of man that she's attracted to. It wasn't the
Yep.
primary focus that she put in there. While there's validity in that too, I'm old enough that I can remember a time in astrology when that was the be all and end all for Mars in a woman's chart, where the perception was that, this whole Mars and Venus polarity thing existed, and Venus in many ways was the personification of woman, Venus and the moon, and Mars was more the domain of men. And in a woman's chart, the placement of Mars indicated who the type of man she'd be attracted to. I feel that societally we've moved on from that in a really, really big way. And a woman can definitely express her own Mars energy. We're very, very clear about that, especially in this time that gender is more fluid than it's ever been, I think. And that raises one of the most interesting points about Mars. As far as the other planets go, most of the expressions and the rulerships of the planets tend to stand the test of time. You know what I mean? They highlight particular aspects of ourselves that are consistent. They don't really change in a lot of ways, whether it comes to age, whether it comes to generation, all of that sort of stuff. But Mars and Saturn, probably more than any other planets, are often reflective of the times that we live in. Our attitude to Mars, how we feel about Mars, how we express our own Mars, how we struggle or we embrace Mars energy, quite often has a lot to do with the times, how we perceive masculinity, how we perceive aggression. Anyone who was alive in the 80s knows that, the way that we looked at Mars energy back then was completely different. It was, and the Gen X has got a reputation, I guess, as being perhaps the most aggressive of the generations. While now there's a lot more emphasis on passivity, I guess you'd call it, and the attitudes to Mars have changed. One of my own personal theories is I think there's a very, very strong connection to the inner planets and the outer planets. And the placement of Pluto at a given time can often have an impact on how we perceive the role of violence, masculinity, and aggression in a society. And I think we experience that on a personal level through Mars. But that's my own theory, and that's something that obviously needs to be developed and looked at and things like that too. But I just thought I'd throw that out there right at the beginning. One of the interesting things about Mars, they're all the personal planets. And we looked at Venus last time and we made a distinction between authenticity and attachment. And this time I guess we're looking more at the authenticity side of the spectrum. So we're going to be looking at Mars today. Does anybody have any questions or any points they want to make about that or anything they want to add on to that? No? Okay, cool. Let's move on. Session 5, Mars. We're going to look at the rulership of Mars in the traditional sense. I thought for the mythology of Mars today, rather than looking at a lot of the old war gods from all around the world, let's have a look at some of the more contemporary gods. Let's look at some of the action heroes of cinema for the last few decades and sort of get a read on Mars energy, of how that's been perceived. What I found interesting with that when I did research, there's a birth date for every single one of those characters around on the internet. They all have a backstory. If you have a look, you can see, what birth date they were, and that tells you what their sun sign was. What I also did was I looked at the placement of Mars at the time the movie was released. as a reflection of the Mars energy that was present at the time, that was flowing through every single person who walked into that cinema, and how that may have appealed to, the qualities of that character that may have appealed to that Mars energy at the time. I thought that would be an interesting little exercise. So that's what I thought I would do with the mythology today. We'll have a look at tarot, like we did last time. And then we'll look at the application of Mars. We'll look at working with Mars. We'll look at aspects. We'll look at client work, working with clients and how we can use Mars a little more in our readings and so on. And in the last section, we'll look at manifesting Mars, how to get more Mars energy flowing into your life if that's what you need. Okay. So Mars. Mars is the god of war, as we all know. In the Roman pantheon, he was second only to Zeus. So in the ranking of gods, he was right there at the top. He was the right-hand man. And, as an expansionist empire, Mars obviously was a very, very central part of their calendar, at the very least, and their culture. So their relationship to violence, their relationship to war, all of that was an ingrained part of their culture. And they recognized that through their worship of the god Mars. Mars rules action and energy. It's about volition, it's about movement, it's about the enforcement and the pushing of one's will and desire. Aggression and conflict. Mars, as we all know, rules aggression, it rules conflict, it rules war on all levels, it rules combat on all levels, whether it's intellectual, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical. It all falls under the domain of Mars. Mars rules sexuality and desire. The more you go on and you start looking at Mars's shopping list of characteristics and superpowers, the more you see it's connected with the adrenaline, with the instincts. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a big part of Mars energy. Mars rules physical activity in itself. Also physical impact, physical force, anything that applies force to something else. And that way Mars, I guess, is connected to physics. You know what I mean? Not the mathematics of physics, but the application of it. Mars and the individual can rule anger and temper. A strong Mars in a culture could represent a warlike culture, where Mars is very, very prominent in the national chart. Or in the chart of an empire. So that's there as well. Sharpness, cutting, scars, anything that breaks the skin, anything that slices the skin is connected to Mars. Anything that, any sort of wound that draws blood has a connection to Mars.
Wow.
Speed, force, impact, car accidents, getting punched, getting hits, getting struck by something, striking something yourself, all of that's all connected to Mars. And again, see that connection to physics. And in many ways, I guess it represents the physical plane. When you look at it from a spiritual point of view, an esoteric point of view, it rules the physical plane and physicality. Actually, I'll just go back. Did anybody have any questions about the previous, or anything that they wanted to add to that? No, we're cruising along okay.
I have a question with this Mars.
Yes.
I haven't done the medical course yet, but when you said this has to do with sharpens, it has to do with surgery as well, or doctors?
Yes,
or
yes, definitely has a connection to surgery. A blade that breaks the skin, the drawing of blood, bloodletting, blood and Mars are connected.
Okay.
Very strong connection between the two.
Of course, right. Blood and Mars.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At the
Bloodletting, oh God.
Yeah, at the base level, it's the color red, it's life force, all of that stuff at the most basic fundamental level. And it is blood through the body is our life. It's, you know what I mean? And the act of taking a life is the extraction of blood from another person, the forcible removal of it. You know what I mean?
It's hot-blooded.
Yeah, hot-blooded. Crimes of passion are all about blood, all of that sort of stuff. It's all certainly connected. So, and at the base level, Mars is absolutely connected to our animal nature. And when it comes to self-actualization, when it comes to authenticity, Mars, oh God, we've all met that person who's got I used to drink with a guy down in Sydney. He was this German man. His family owned a series of hotel chains, and he was the definitive Aries. Small man, not the smartest man you ever met, but man, did he had the biggest mouth and the biggest presence when you went anywhere. You know what I mean? And he was the absolute personification of Aries. He was an Aries. When I met him, his wife had just left him after 50 years. I can't remember what he said to her, but she hit him over the head with a marble cutting board, emptied the safe, and left. So and we had this conflicted man who was both mourning and grieving, but still stomping around with all the pomp and authority of a tiny Aries, and he was just fluctuating between the two. Um, so that pomp and that ego, and it's a completely different type to that come hither energy of Leo. It's a in your face kind of energy. So, and that's Mars energy. It's me, me, me. This is what I want. I remember he told me he made his fortune in Australia. He came over from Germany. He'd been disowned by his parents. He went to a bank. He decided him and a friend were going to go into a partnership business buying secondhand commercial aircraft, storing them in Broken Hill, which is out in the desert in New South Wales, and then on selling them to companies and things like that. He had no capital. He had no bank history when he came in, but he went into the bank meeting and absolutely bullied the bank manager into getting a massive loan. And every time the bank manager said no, he said, I don't accept that. And I could see the way that he was telling that story was exactly the way that he said it to the bank manager. And that's Mars energy. Mars energy, you're sitting there thinking, well, if it wasn't Mars energy, if you had a lot more Venus energy, and you're thinking the other person would be thinking, oh, well, that's fair. He said no, I'm going to back down. No. Now, that's what I thought was going to happen. Mars it doesn't even occur to them that someone's going to say no. And if they say no, it's because you obviously haven't inflicted enough damage on them. That's, what I mean? Whether it's mental, emotional, or physical, one way or another, they'll come round. You know what I mean? They just don't know. So that's Mars energy. That's Mars energy. It doesn't care about other people. It knows what it wants, and it's not ashamed to ask for it. If we're all probably honest, we're all at least a little envious of that energy, especially the more empathic we get. And that's somehow something that we all seem to share. The more spiritual we become, more we start to care about other people, God damn it. And how complicated that makes our lives. So, but people with strong Mars energy, they don't have those problems. You know what I mean? So, and when we start to build authenticity in our lives, it's built on wisdom, it's built on an understanding of what other people and how we impact other people. But the realization that even though this may hurt somebody else, we still need to get the things that we need to live, and that's where we start. And then we sort of build up from there. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they want to add to that? Okay. I can't believe I said all that based on surgery, but it is what it is. So let's look at our first god of Mars, John Rambo. Now, his birthday is actually a Cancer, according to the character, Cancerian. I'm sure you can see that with this nurturing, stay-at-home kind of energy. The movie, the first movie, the Rambo movie, I think the first movie was First Blood, but the first actual Rambo movie was October 22nd, 1982, and Mars was in Libra at the time. Yeah, it's a long time ago, isn't it? Justice. So that's one of the qualities of Mars and Libra, and those are definitely, it's a theme that was definitely persistent through all of those Rambo movies. Conflict resolution through action. That's a really nice way of saying he killed a lot of people. So that's definitely, conflict resolution in Mars. And it's interesting too, and this gets back to the culture, how Mars features in particular cultures. Every culture has its own idea of conflict resolution. I remember when after Sudan, we had a lot of Sudanese refugees had to come over to Australia, and I remember quite a lot of Australians didn't like it. And I remember the Sudanese walking around and the mall down where we were and things like that, and Australians making racist comments to them and making gestures about the burqas and things like that. And I remember thinking to myself, dude, where they come from, conflict resolution is violence and killing. I'd be really, really careful with the way you approach people and things like that. It's different to the way it is over here. You know what I mean? And it's different in every culture. We all have our own idea of where culture, of where violence fits into the spectrum, whether it comes to whether it's for conflict resolution, whether it's something that's acceptable in marriage, whether it's something that's acceptable on the street, things like that. We all have different ideas culturally of where violence features in that. So conflict resolution through action, protecting others. That was a definite theme through these Rambo movies. In a lot of ways, though, it was sort of an excuse to go over and blow up people in other countries. Those people wouldn't have needed help if they hadn't gone there in the first place, but let's not split hairs. Balancing strength and strategy. So yeah, that was definitely something that he did too. And that's, for in Libra, that can be a weapon of choice, dilemma, or programming for Mars in Libra. And a strong sense of honor. That's something that Rambo had. And one of the quotes from the movie, one of the most memorables, is "War is in your blood." So that's something from the Rambo movies. Does anybody have any comments about that or anything they want to say? No?
Yeah, but not about the Rambo. Like, since Mars is in the time when it came out,
Yeah,
Mars in Libra,
yeah.
Mars would be in exile, right? So he would be uncomfortable.
Say that again. Yeah. Well, yeah. Because Mars generally, under its own volition, operates under its own volition and authority. And in Mars there's that dilemma anyway. My guess is the people who went in and saw that movie weren't divided, weren't in any sort of dilemma. But probably at the time, I'm guessing, especially when these movies came out, there was probably some sort of backlash happening. Isn't this the time? Who was it? God, can anybody remember back in the 80s when Dee Snider went to, was it Tipper Gore? Went into the American, what do you call the parliament over there, and presented a speech based on freedom of speech when they were trying to shut down music and edit and reduce their access to music, and they were trying to make a connection between music and violence and music and drug use and all of that sort of stuff. There's a very, very strong conservative element in the government. And I remember Dee Snider, the lead singer from Twisted Sister, went into the American, what do you call the parliament over there? He read a speech, and it was incredibly eloquent and incredibly direct at the same time. And he was there in his full, with all his hair and all of this sort of stuff. And he walked away the winner that day. I remember right back around those times, there was a lot of talk and a lot of division in American culture about violence. And it was interesting because I thought politically a lot of these people who were condemning, the connection between violence and music were the same ones who were mobilizing armies and sending them around the world, and there was a sense of justification in that. So it was a really, really interesting time from that time. And anybody can remember back in those times, we had Schwarzenegger, we had Stallone, we had all these action heroes going around on these justified missions to go to other countries, whether they were wanted or not. To enforce their will on other cultures and other regimes and things like that.
Yeah, so you could say that he was invading territory, because if he's on the other side, yeah,
But
who's Mars in Libra?
but that's the point I was making with protecting others. When you're protecting others, it doesn't kind of feel that way. You know what I mean? You're going over there and you're righting a wrong. You're saving somebody who needs to be saved. When if they went there in the first place, it wouldn't have needed saving. It's a bit of a circular argument.
See, because Libra is like peaceful, wanting to be peaceful.
Well, that's true, but also too, you remember, there's two brands of Libra. There's the justice side of it, and there's the retributive side of it as well, through nemesis. You know what I mean? So, and again, too, they're the two polarities of justice. And in a lot of ways, that's what we were arguing about.
That's true. That's true.
You know what I mean? Without retribution, justice in itself is ineffective. It's just a notion we're presenting to other people, and we're giving them the right to decide whether they want to take those values on or not. So yeah. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on that? Okay. Ellen Ripley. She's a Capricorn, if you look at her birth date. Anybody not see the Alien movie, the first one? Okay. All right. What a bundle of fun that was. That was an interesting movie. I don't know if anybody's read the history about it, but a lot of that was ad-libbed. A lot of that, the actors didn't know what was happening. That scene where that alien popped out of that chest, nobody knew that was coming, only John Hurt and the director. So the expressions in the movie, it's like Blair Witch. A lot of the expressions on people's faces are the genuine expressions of genuine emotion at the time. They had no idea things were about to happen for a lot of that movie. And a lot of the dialogue was ad-libbed. He just told them who they were, what their roles were. They got right into character, and then they just played those characters, and and let the movie decide itself. That movie was released 6th of December 1979, and Mars was in Virgo at the time. Okay, so if we look at some of the Virgo and Mars and Virgo qualities Ellen Ripley had, she was definitely a precision person. She was a planner. And she was a problem solver, the second one. Even when her anxiety was high, even when her blood was pumping through her head, she could still make clear decisions, and she still would take risks, and she was still prepared to put herself out there and do what she needed to do in order to get to the next step. She had a very strong work ethic. There's no doubting that. Right from her character, when things were great, she's probably that person in the office that everybody's a bit sick of. She probably worked in HR, bit of a bully. You know what I mean? Wanted things done her way, and her way was by the book. And that way she was quite justified in enforcing that. Efficiency was important for her. She was extremely efficient, and hygiene was important. I don't know if you remember in the first movie when that guy got that alien stuck on his face. She didn't want to let them in the ship because of the protocols for quarantining and things like that. She kept the door locked until somebody else on the ship opened the door and let them in. And the memorable line from the Alien series, "Get away from her, you bitch." That was in Alien 2. So, and she was probably, and it's funny, what was this movie? I think Jennifer Lawrence did the Hunger Games movies, and she was talking about how there'd never been a real female heroine until she played that role. Well, I beg to differ. I think I would have put Ellen Ripley up against pretty much any action hero back of the time. She didn't have the muscles. She didn't have the strength. But if her back was against the wall, I would have put money on her, I think. So, does anybody have any comments about that? No? Okay. Mars and Aquarius. Tyler Durden, Fight Club. Did anybody not see the movie Fight Club?
Haven't seen.
We got to the movie.
Ooh, we've seen that movie a million times. Let me tell you, I've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I seen it. That's what. With Jean-Claude Van Damme?
What's that? Sorry?
No, girl, it's Brad Pitt. It's Brad Pitt. You need to watch it. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. It's like, it's a mind.
It's a really interesting movie. What I was talking about before about attitudes to violence, attitudes to masculinity and stuff, this movie really, really explores that. One of the quotes he says in the movie is, "We're a generation of men raised by women." And it explores what masculinity is to men. And a lot of it's about reclaiming the animalistic, nihilistic, violent side of man. And it's interesting. It's watching this whole debate unfold, especially in this generation. Speaking as a man, men have been kept on the brink of controlled savagery for thousands of years. That's been our role in society. Whether it's to combat the potential of war, whether it's to be the pioneer and go to a place that needs to be broken so that others can move there and live, for whatever reason. Men have been kept on the brink of controlled savagery for thousands of years, and it's something that's deeply, deeply programmed in our DNA. And it's been interesting to watch the dismantling of that ever since probably the Generation Y, I think. I was laughing with Michael about this a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about how, in a lot of ways, Gen X probably are one of the most aggressive generations there ever was, one of the most nihilistic. And we wondered why children have turned out the way they did, now. But when we sat and we were really honest about it, it was probably to protect those kids from us. So we know what each other are like. We know what our society was like. we're probably protecting our own children from what we've created.
Correct.
I didn't feel comfortable about that, and we stopped talking about it.
Yep.
That was a quick conversation over, Killer. But Fight Club really explores that from the masculine psyche point of view, and in the end, it's a movie about anarchy. Tyler Durden's an Aquarius. The way they calculate that, the first time you see him in the movie is on an airplane, and I think it was based. Somebody noticed the date on the ticket that Edward Norton had purchased. That was the date he was on that plane where Tyler Durden first turned up. The movie was released the 11th of November 1999, and Mars was in Aquarius. And some of the traits we see in Tyler Durden are rebelliousness. There's no doubt about that. Unconventional. He's a very unconventional character. In fact, that pretty much defines him. He was an advocate for collective change. So he wasn't just trying to change for himself. He was trying to create changes for men, for an entire gender. It was about reclaiming something. He was definitely an anarchist. And the last scene in the movie, I won't spoil that for anybody, really, really brings that home. And he was, despite the push for collective change, he was also a very, very strong individualist. And these are all Mars and Aquarius qualities, and we saw those. One of the quotes from the movie is, maybe self-improvement isn't the answer, maybe self-destruction is the answer. It's about annihilating the self so that other things could take root. Annihilating all of those things that have been put there, that from the society we grow up in. And the only way for us to be free of all of that is to destroy it so we can create something new. It may be, florid prose legitimized by violence. Who knows? Who knows? Everybody I know, especially when it comes down to a male-female debate about what this movie was really about, it really dissolves down quickly. It tends to be, it polarizes. Yeah. Does anybody have any comments about this? No? Okay. John Wick. According to his birthday, he's a Virgo. And this movie was released the 30th of October 2014. Even that feels like a really long time ago. And that put Mars in Capricorn at the time. Some of the qualities we saw in John Wick are perseverance. We definitely saw that. Discipline, strategic. He was very, very strategic. Professionalism. It didn't matter what happened in the movie. He somehow always managed to maintain his professional cool. I remember a scene he had a fight with a guy on a train, stuck a knife in his neck, and then said, "If you pull this out, you'll bleed to death." And then, "I'm telling you, this is a professional courtesy." And then he walked away. So I don't know if it gets more Mars and Capricorn than that. And he had a respect for structures and rules. He was part of a society. That society had rules, and he abided by those rules. It didn't matter how crazy things got, he stuck by those rules. Very similar to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, if anybody remembers that Ang Lee movie back in the 90s, where all of those warriors lived by a very, very strict code, and that's the code that made it almost impossible for the male and female leads in the movie to be together. And a quote from the John Wick movie, "Do I look civilized to you?" Yeah. Does anybody have any comments about John? Or Mars and Capricorn? Has anybody got Mars and Capricorn?
Me.
Just wow. Of course you do. Okay.
Yeah.
Last one. Sarah Connor. She's a Gemini. The movie was released. Actually, she did a really good job as Gemini. Anybody who saw her in the first movie and then saw her in the second movie saw two completely different animals. The first movie, she was, I think she was a waitress, wasn't she, at a diner? In the second movie, she was basically a conspiracy theorist who, with a big case of weapons, and she knew how to use them. So she did a whole evolution in a short amount of time. And she was in an asylum too, which is very Gemini, I think. So, yeah. The movie was released on the 5th of September 1991, and Mars was in Leo. And some of the qualities that she expressed in that movie were courage. She definitely had a lot of courage. There were no doubts about that. She had very, very strong protective instincts, which is something that is a way that Mars definitely demonstrates itself through Leo. So those qualities were very strong in her. She had strong leadership and command abilities. Commands and leadership are things that are very, very prominent in the sign Aries. For many, with a strong Mars in their chart, they see leadership as a right. You know, from the most base societies, generally leadership is established through a combat. You know what I mean? Whoever's the strongest generally has the right to rule. In the most hostile societies, that's generally the case. So that's, you know, something that she demonstrated. She had a very strong will. I remember her son in the movie, John Connor. The biggest problem he had with her was he what he wanted, what he believed, never got a look, and she told him exactly the way things were going to be. She told him what he was going to do with his time, and how she was, you know, what he was going to be when he grew up. She had the next couple of decades of his life already planned out, whether he liked it or not. And that can be a Leo trait right there too. So that's something that she had. She was also good at inspiring other people as well. So she was ready for something that was going to come. She prepared herself. She did everything that she could, but she also did the best she could to network with other people and build a network around her so that there would be other people who were ready too, you know, when the machines did their thing. And one of the big quotes from that movie is there is no fate but what we make for ourselves. That's probably one of the most memorable quotes from the movie. Does anybody have any comments on those? I just thought it might be an interesting way to look at Mars, because probably, you know, Mars energy is pretty self-evident in the way that it works at a personal level. But I think socially, these characters probably are modern deities in their own rights. You know, they all have a legacy. They all are part of a pantheon in a way. And they've all made an impression and a change on society. And they've all been embraced and accepted, you know, as, God, not necessarily role models, but as characters of worth and note, you know, something that's very, very singular and important to our society. No? Okay.
Agreed. Right.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Now looking at the tarot. The tower is ruled by Mars. Does somebody want to make a comment, give us some insight on what the tower represents in the tarot?
It represents like destruction before things change. Like it's kind of like when your life might be something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. A lot of the process of the tower too is once the destructions happen, we find ourselves at the end of it. Those parts of ourselves that still remain are closer to our true selves. The sides of ourselves that are not strong enough to survive that sort of destruction are whittled away. They become destroyed in the process, or we let them go because they're too painful to hold on to, or they slow us down. So, any other insights in the tower?
Sudden change.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's destruction, but once the change does come, it's kind of worth it. It doesn't feel like it at the time.
Yeah.
But the results it pays off.
It does. And again, too, this goes back to something I was saying right at the beginning. There's a really, really powerful connection between Pluto and Mars. In a lot of ways, you remember back before Pluto was discovered, Mars was the ruler of Scorpio. And then when Pluto was discovered, we also assign that as co-ruler as well. And I feel like Pluto is Mars for society. It's, you know, something that it's in the same sign generationally. It's one of those outer planets that decide the quality of a society, you know, and what they're going to value, how they see themselves, how they actualize, and things like that too. And I think there's that Mars is perhaps the active expression of Pluto energy at a personal level. How we respond to that, you know what I mean? So that's the tower. The Emperor. ruled by Aries, which is the ruling sign, the ruling planet is Mars. Does anybody want to comment on the Emperor, what the Emperor stands for in the tarot?
The oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Like somebody was gonna say something.
You go ahead, girl.
No, go ahead.
I don't know. I wasn't gonna say anything. I was clearing my throat for just in case.
The emperor is like structure, is control, power, kind of like let's say kind of ruling with the arm fist, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Authority.
Yes. Yeah. Simplify it,
Sort
huh?
Well, authority and leadership, I think that's a big part of it too. But yeah, I agree with you. A lot of it is those Mars expressions of authority and leadership. It's might as right in a lot of ways. There's a lot of masculine energy in the Emperor. You know, it's part of a duality. There's the Emperor and the Empress. But again, too, you know, as we talked about right at the beginning, the Emperor's not something reserved purely for men. It's not just something that's male alone. We all have our male side to us. Gosh, after watching the Olympics too, I think more than ever that's become something really, really central to the debate right now. You know, about gender, about masculinity and things like that. It's been a really, really interesting process. God, what a fascinating Olympics this has been. You know what I mean? In so many ways. But especially women who identify and embrace Lilith on their chart as well. Mars definitely is a very, very strong, strong presence in their charts too. You know what I mean? So I think in the traditional sense, the Emperor and the Empress, this is my own simplified understanding of tarot, were presented as polarities, you know, as gender roles, and in a lot of ways where we perceive those through society, but that's not necessarily how we express it at a personality level, not personally. And I think the line between society and the personal is much, much finer than it's ever been now, especially in this generation. So it's been really, really fascinating to stand back and watch this whole thing unfold. Does anybody else want to comment on the Emperor or the Olympics or anything that's happening?
So were you saying that Lilith is like the female version of Mars? Like the
Not
feminine
necessarily.
aspect?
I think it's a side of femininity. We did the moon session and we talked about there were four main goddesses and they all represented different aspects of the moon cyclically. There is definitely a personal power element to Lilith and embracing. I think a lot of that, like I said, that book that I was talking about right at the beginning when I read, and that perception that Mars on a woman's chart showed where the type of man she'd be attracted to. That was Mars's role, probably more than anything. Women weren't really female anger, female aggression wasn't really accepted. We're still sort of struggling with it now, I guess, in a lot of ways too. So it was politely assigned off to a proxy role, you know, where something else. And I think Lilith, at her core, for somebody who embraces that, and that's something I really talk about, I think, in the advanced astrology course. Because if you're going to embrace Lilith energy in your chart, then you need to be all in. You can't half-ass that, not as a woman. If you do, then Mars energy, yes, is most certainly available. It's the energy of violence. It's the energy of enforcing your will on the world. It's the very Kardashian-esque sort of energy. It's the will of it's the energy of sexuality and using sexuality to get what you want, and even sexuality just for self-satisfaction at an animal-based level. They're all Mars qualities, and I think Lilith is a gateway to that. And it's acceptance of that side of the personality, because society for thousands of years has had a lot to say on this topic. And I think embracing Lilith energy is consciously making a choice for yourself to separate yourself from that dialogue and to follow your own heart or desire or head or fist or whatever, you know, and go down that. That's my own feeling on that. Feel free to challenge that. But I think, especially now, God, we've been talking about this Iman Khalif at the Olympic Games, but then you watch, I don't know if anybody's watched women's rugby. There've been the women's rugby championships happening for a while there, and some of those women, my God, I think if you put them in the ring against Iman Khalif, they'd flatten her, absolutely flatten her. You know what I mean? But there's no answers in that. What that's telling us is that there is Mars energy present in women. Some women are very, very comfortable with it, very, very strong with it. I love combat sports. I watch a lot of combat sports. You know, women's competition has never been more fierce than it is now. It's incredibly competitive. It's a completely different sort of energy. We're a lot more open and permissive about it now than we've ever been in the past. And I think Lilith at an individual level is permission, you know, as a woman allowing a conscious choice to allow those energies. And I can't speak as a woman, I'm not one, but my understanding when I intellectualize Lilith and what it would mean to me if it was on my chart, that's what I see, you know. Feel free to correct me and I will stand corrected.
Now, I just found it amusing because my Lilith's in my 12th house along with my Mars.
Okay, with Mars. Okay, all right. I think we need to do another reading, Sandra. Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments or anything they want to add for that? Okay. So it's very much, I think, just as much inner authority as it is outer authority as well. And again, being authentic to yourself, being authentic to what you want and your own needs. Maybe that's reflected in the Emperor too. Maybe that's the
Well, in the
Mars.
Emperor also, in the numerology, it's 4, correct? Isn't that 4? 4. And that suggests, you know, 4 is a number of balance, and it suggests stability. And to me, that card suggests stability, some sort of boundary, you know. And then the Aries obviously is a fire sign, which would suggest action. So it looks like it's a protector, and it's kind of balancing out the situation.
Can be. That opens up a really interesting debate, though, about what stability is. The biggest empire in the world, and probably the most destructive empire in the world, was the Mongol Empire. But they were nomads. They never held territory. Their empire was enormous. And they killed millions of people. They're probably the biggest killers in history. Yet they were completely nomadic. They never held ground. But in its own perverse kind of way, they created a kind of stability too. And Genghis Khan definitely had incredible authority and charisma in what he did too. So there's different expressions of that kind of energy too. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there too. But I hear what you're saying, you know, that number 4, I think in order for authority to be real, it needs to create some form of stability. Even if that stability is created through fear, you know what I mean? Then that there's by itself is the very, very symbol of authority, you know. So maybe that's a different aspect of it too, but I certainly agree with what you're saying. And the 7 of Fire, the will to stand alone. Does anybody want to tell us about the 7 of Fire?
What is it, the 7 of Fire?
The 7 of Wands. Yeah.
I can't hear it. I can't hear what you said.
7 of Wands, 7 of Fire. Sorry, that's
the 7 of Wands. 7 of Wands. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's a card of action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody want to add to that? Crystal, are you going to say something?
Sure.
No.
7 of Wands.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Did my screen just change?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
It did just change?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I don't know what happened. I touched my space bar and we have chaos. Okay, that looks better. Are we back?
Yes, we're getting there. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
I'll just say quickly about the 7 of Wands, what I know, because it was a special card that I couldn't understand, so I studied it a lot. It represents Mars in Leo, so it's a lot of Mars feels good in another fire sign, and he's very combative, and Leo gives him security in his identity. It makes him a real fighter, a king who will block, who will fight for what he believes in, who will defend. I see it like Alone Against Rome. It's like, I'm going to stand up to all of you and I'm going to kill all of you. It's like protection and defense and very, very, very aggressive.
Yeah.
And he protects his achievements. So Six of Wands is everybody's cheering him in the crowd. He's like 7 would be like the gladiator or the chariot.
Yeah.
Chariots of fire. That's what I mean with the 7 of Wands.
I think that's a perfect summary of that. The will to stand alone, the strength to stand alone too against adversity.
Oh God, love it. Yes, the strength. I want to write that down. The strength to stand alone
So
against
Sarah
all
Connor.
odds.
Against
Great.
all comers. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that sounds like a perfect summary. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Wasn't Sarah Connor the Mars in Leo?
That's true. That sounds like her too, doesn't
Yes,
it?
it does. And that kind of looks like her standing there,
It
holding
certainly
in.
does.
All right. Exactly.
But well spotted. Yeah.
And 7 is the number of introspection. So I think that it needs to be intertwined into the card as well somehow.
Yeah. I think the wasteland in the card's symbolic too. It is about being alone. It is about being separate from everything else, which for Leo can be quite hard too. You know what I mean? Leo loves it. Its worshippers loves its throne and having those around. So it's the will to step out from that and to isolate and to go out and stand in your own strength and your own will and manifest. And it's interesting because when you look at Leo at the esoteric level, it's a completely different kind of rulership after that, and maybe separating yourself from the crowd, separating yourself from admirers who are only going to say good things about you, and going out and standing in your own strength and finding your own personal strength. It makes you better for others. Maybe that's the next part of this journey. They return and they have more to offer, like the prodigal son in a lot of ways. So, yeah.
It kind of looks like the Fool has grown up
Yeah.
and is now a grown up and on another mission, maybe.
Yeah, could be.
Hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hero. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. The hero's what's it called? The hero's mission? Is that it?
Hero's
Yeah,
journey.
The hero's journey. Oh yes, the hero's journey, you
That's right.
guys.
The hero's
That's it.
journey. That's right. It's like the
Yeah.
Argonaut, isn't it? Yeah.
Which
That's
is
one
kind of
that-
what the tarot is actually, because it's the Fool's journey. So I guess it's the same thing, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
When the fool gets to the chariot, he becomes the hero.
Yep.
Guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good. That's cool. All right.
I love these cards.
Oh, okay.
They're
That's
pretty
good.
awesome.
Working on it. I'll talk about it after if you want to talk about it. Okay. Working with Mars. Okay. So Mars is initiating energy. Wherever Mars is on the chart, it tends to be a starting point. It's like its own little startup in a lot of ways. The house, the modality, the element, all of those other elements surrounding Mars, defining Mars at the moment, tell us exactly how that startup's going to go, whether it's going to even get off the ground, whether it's going to go the distance, all of that sort of stuff. But Mars on the chart is a point of initiation. It's initiating energy. It's a beginning point. It's a flash point. It invites action. It invites movement. And you strip away all of that other stuff and you just look at that right there. Because some people really struggle with Mars on their chart. But if you just stand right back and look at this is a place where something's supposed to start, and just simplify it right down to its bare bones and think about it right that. And then you start adding the other ingredients, and then you start to maybe get a better idea of what's happening in that house and happening with that planet, especially if somebody's got a very complicated or very difficultly placed Mars. That's a nice starting point. This is where things are supposed to happen, where things are supposed to begin. This is the point of movement. It doesn't matter how stagnant the rest of the chart may be. Something's supposed to start here and something's supposed to move forward. So let's do the detective work and figure out what that's supposed to be. Mars asserts, and we've been talking about this all the way through. Mars is about, at the extremes, it's enforcing your will on the world. It's enforcing your will on other people. on situations and things like that. That's at one extreme. At the other end, it's the inability to do those things. It's extreme difficulty. It's a struggle for people to do all of those things too. But Mars is the representation of that. Just by being on a chart, it doesn't guarantee we're going to get all these superpowers that come with the planet. It just tells us what the nature of the experience will be, you know, how it may be, and the story that will begin from there, and how that story may unfold based on the position, the modality, the elements, the aspects that we've got to other things that are happening on the chart, and the choices that we've made. Everything on the chart's interconnected. So when we start working with a planet that's connected to Mars by an aspect, we start to poke at that Mars, and if it's positive energy, we're either fueling it. If it's negative energy, then we're probably getting pushback, either internally or externally. Mars rules conflict, so how comfortable we are in a conflict situation. Mars rules the adrenal glands, and things like that too, but a very specific kind. You know, everybody's got that fight, flight response. Mars is definitely the fight response in a lot of ways. If you know what I mean. So, and if that's not strong enough, so that can be aspected. That can be something that's aspected, and it's very, very difficult to intellectualize that. And that's an interesting thing. Martial arts has been a part of my life for a very, very long time. And I remember when I was doing karate, we used to have these black belts who they do all the forms, they do all the kata and all of that sort of stuff. You know, all the things you can do by yourself. In order to get stronger and learn karate, and they could progress right up to a brown belt point, but in order to become a black belt, they had to do kumite, which is combat. They had to fight other karatekas, and whether, you know, and some of them they're no contact, other ones it's full contact, and you get these people who've been doing forms for a decade, you know, and they've been throwing punches in the air for a decade and things like that, and they step into an arena and they get hit in the head. You watch all that training go out the window in a second, all of it. Because they don't know how to cope with that. They don't know how to cope with the adrenaline that's coming through and things like that. And that is definitely a Mars, probably a Mars letting you down response. But you, like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan when they step into the ring till they get punched in the face. You know what I mean? And then after that, it's all Mars. Either your Mars is going to kick in or it's not going to kick in. I know from experience. I grew up in quite a rough neighborhood in Auckland, back in New Zealand. Some of the best street fighters that we ever saw there were good because they just knew how to take a hit. You know, they didn't go to pieces. The adrenaline didn't take over. They didn't freak out and things like that. They've been hit before. They knew how to process that energy, and they knew how to respond. You know what I mean? And in a lot of situations and combat situations, that's the difference between a rookie and a veteran. How you process that adrenaline, how you process that fear, all of that sort of stuff. And if you can experience all of that and not only function but excel, that is a Mars experience. You know, that is the cultivation, the conscious cultivation of Mars. For a lot of us, to become astrologers, to become more effective in a boardroom, to become more effective in our own day-to-day lives, we need to find that energy. I think for a lot of people who are thinking about being astrologers, but still uncomfortable or wary about taking that step forward, for many from discussions I've had, it's the fear of conflict. It's the fear of not knowing how to process the aggression of a client, or you know, even a client is more passionate than you are. Somebody challenges you, and you're unable to accept that challenge without your adrenaline kicking in, without, you know, without fear rising up, and things like that. And people think about that, and all that anxiety rises up. Then I think in a lot of ways that's a Mars situation. And maybe the best way to get around that is to become a veteran, go out there and get punched in the face a couple of times. You know what I mean? Start to take on clients that are not your friends, not your family, and just roll with it. Once you've done it 3 or 4 times, you know, all the stuff that's not Mars, you start to become comfortable with, and then eventually life will always send you some asshole who's going to push all your buttons or try and, you know, bring all their prejudice or their stupidity or whatever the case may be. I feel comfortable using those words. Been there, done that, and you get better at dealing with it. You do. You know, it doesn't mean the adrenaline won't rise. I still get a bit of adrenaline sometimes when we do this. You know what I mean? Just sitting down and talking and things like that. But I've done it enough times to at least know once things start, things will be fine. You're also nice. I'm not expecting any Mars ambushes to come, so that helps. But I just thought I'd put that out there. Mars at the most basic level rules our fight or flight response, specifically the fight response. And that's something that you can cultivate. And sometimes it is just as simple as going out and getting punched a couple of times. Not physically. Don't go out there and get beat up. But I'm talking about wherever you're feeling apprehension and fear and things like that, just go out there and take a few shots. You know what I mean? And if when something bad happens, when you do have a bad experience with a client, don't think, oh, well, I'm going to go hang that up and go study for a while. Get straight back in the saddle again. That's the same with anything where, you know, you take a hit and you decide, oh, wow, that was scary. I'm going to back away from that for a while. The longer you wait, the harder it is to get back. That's just the way it is. That's how it works at a psychological and a biological level, you know. And it's probably a smart thing to do. But if it's something that you really, really want, then just get straight back into it again too. And so, you know, that's just my personal diatribe on conflict and adrenaline. So I think that's a really, really big part of Mars. And Mars, out of all the planets in the chart, it will be our biggest teacher on how to work with that energy. And it'll tell us where we are on that scale as well. Does anybody want to comment up to this point? Because we've said quite a lot so far. Has anybody had any experiences like that?
Well, no, I haven't. I got my Mars in Gemini. So I'm a communicator. I like to communicate. I'm good at communicating. I think anything can be solved through communication. But once I do get mad, all bets are off. But I'm used to dealing with, I was the caseworker at the Salvation Army, so I'm used to dealing with people rude and stuff. But I will say that it is kind of scary. Like, I would say when I was interpreting my sister's chart and I was doing too much, it made me not want to get back out there again. It made me want to stop what I was doing, go back and try and learn some more. Or it wasn't that I wasn't interpreting right. I was just saying everything. I was everywhere. So the fact that you said just get back out there, that's some good advice because I didn't. This was like last year. I had it all out there, and after that meeting, I took everything back. I put all my content and everything back. I was like, okay, no, we're gonna wait because what if I run into another customer like my sister, and she don't want to hear it, you know? But I'm also starting to realize that people have specific questions. Yeah. So I for her yesterday, and it went easy, but I almost did it again. I started going everywhere. And she stopped me and she said, Crystal, she said, this is what I need to know. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was able to, and it went really good. She was really happy about it, but getting back out there was kind of hard.
Yeah. Especially when working with people, because you never know what you're going to get. You know, when you're meeting with strangers and things like that. And it's not always aggression. Often it's the hardest readings are ones where people are really suffering. Something really terrible's happened in their lives, or they're still processing something. For me, they're the hardest. You know what I mean? You don't know what you can and what you can't touch and things like that. But again, too, that takes a completely different kind of courage. Again, what I think is once you get some experience, the answer to that's to not necessarily back down. Just be really careful where you step. And it's interesting what you're saying. And I believe this. When a client comes to you and they've got a question in their head, then keep that question in your head. And when you're talking, listen to what you're saying. And if what you're saying is not getting closer to that, then stop. That's always been my guide in life. When I'm doing public speaking and things like that too, I know what my topic is and I can ad lib. I can do it without any problems. But I always keep a guide in my head. I try not to say anything more than anything that's going to be moving the conversation and everything towards that topic. And in my head, I try and picture what the outcome's going to be. When I've achieved this outcome, then that's done. There's nothing more to talk about. So every step I'm taking is moving me to that outcome. But that's my approach to the way I do things. Everybody's going to find their own, you know. But when a client tells you what their question is, that's a gift. You should accept that gift every time. Yeah, every time. Yeah, cool.
About subject real quick. I can go everywhere. I can start talking about stuff. I'm very passionate about it. I wish I
Yeah.
had the discipline I had to stick to the subject. So even when I'm doing my podcast, I have to stick to the subject because that Mars in Gemini and it's in 11th house. It will have my thoughts jumping everywhere. You know what I want to say, but once I get there, don't tell them where the conversation gonna go. So for real. Man. Yeah.
Well, you guess you're more a luxury tour than an express train. Maybe that's the way you promote yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you'll see everything. You know, that's cool for the same amount of money. Sounds good to me. So Mars triggers adrenaline, and we've talked about this a lot. It rules the fight instinct in people, and it's something that can be cultivated. It's interesting, Muay Thai, one of the most simple exercises you do in Muay Thai all the time is just sit there and do this all the time so you get used to things flying past your face all the time. It feels really stupid when you first do it, but after a while you do it, you stop blinking, you stop flinching, all of that sort of stuff. You get closer and closer, and you know, it just seems to build up an instinct inside you. Simple little things like that, you know, and they all contribute to the fight instinct, and they all help to nullify those adrenaline levels that people feel when they're in a conflict situation. You know what I mean? It also, Mars rules uncontrolled or repressed anger. It represents anger on the chart. So our relationship with anger. Mars is really, really interesting when we start looking at aspects and houses that it rules and things like that, because it starts to give us insight into where anger might appear on the chart. It was interesting when you did your reading, Sandra, you've got Mars in your 12th house there, and I was really interested to see what your relationship with anger is, because that's a really complicated placement for Mars up there in the 12th house. It can be everything from someone who just swallows anger to somebody who probably ends up institutionalized because of their anger, even in a psych ward or a prison. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's what it can represent. So a person's relationship with anger, especially if they're coming in and they're looking for relationship counseling, you know, the easy ones are when people come in and ask, who are looking for love, you know, and things like that. But people who've got love are in the process of blowing it. They're more interesting readings, and Mars somehow always seems to end up in there. You know what I mean? Whether it's sexuality or whether it's violence, different forms of violence, it always seems to play a role. So that's where a lot of the detective work starts, or where a lot of the damage seems to be. You'll normally find a body somewhere where Mars is on the chart. So, you know, it's a good place to start. And like I said, it rules our relationship with desire and with anger. So that's a really, really good place on the chart to be working with that. Does anybody want to add anything to this, or have any thoughts on or any experience with this as well? Does anybody get a Mars in a really interesting spot on their chart that sort of highlights?
I have a question actually.
Okay.
For Mars square your midheaven, which
Yeah.
would also, if your midheaven is conjunct your sun,
Yeah.
like how would you say that would manifest in like the idea of identity and kind of like self-growth and personal development?
If we look at Mars, so far we've talked about Mars as a personal thing, something that comes from ourselves, something connected to our own authenticity. And at the basic level, what that means is really it can be our own inner temper tantrum as well, our own inner angry child and things like that too. So you could be the most spiritual person. You can be the most centered person. You may even know what your goal is, but when something starts, but anger can stand in the way of that. That might be a way it expresses. And then we start doing detective work based on the house that it's sitting in. I mean, if it's in the 12th house, it could be repressed anger. It could be anger that's down there, that's coming up again too. It could be anger at yourself. Sometimes, that could be imposter syndrome in a way. You know what I mean? You're out there, especially if you're a teacher and your inner voice is saying, oh, wow, you're full of shit. You don't believe that. You don't do that in your own life. That could be an internal dialogue or expression of that. Depending on what house it's in and what it's connected to, and things like that too. But it could also be the person who's in a spiritual circle. And we see these all the time, especially in astrology, where somebody's talking about something new, and then that person is pointing a finger in their chest and saying, well, that's bullshit. That's not how that works, and things like that too. It just may conflict or contradict your idea of spirituality and who you present yourself as. That's one way of looking at it. I mean, I don't know if that's how it's expressing for yourself or whoever has this placement and things like that too. But it's like your own internal adrenaline, your own internal gut and instincts might be saying something completely different. Sometimes too, you may find yourself in a spiritual group, and I've had this before too, and again too, it's probably my Gen X programming. I'm sitting there in a group and people are all hugging and you know, sharing you know, their lovey-doveyness and stuff like that. There's something in me that's just going, ugh. You know what I mean? So it could be that, you know, I respond like that when I see man buns, you know, so maybe that's what it is, you know, something like that too. You know, you in a lot of ways, yeah, your midheaven is who you're aspiring to be and who you're trying to be, and they're cultivating qualities, but you're certainly not there yet. And the good news is you've got this Mars constantly reality checking where you are at any given time. To tell you, am I there yet? No, he still looks like an idiot. So maybe that could be a way of expressing that, just off the top of my head. What are your thoughts on that? How do you feel about man buns?
I'm not really like, I never really thought about it, to be honest.
Okay, it's a
But
rhetorical
I live
question.
so
It's a
close to
rhetorical
Brooklyn
question.
that like there's a lot of man buns in Brooklyn, so
Okay, fair enough, fair
um,
enough. Yeah, geographically, not a good question.
but no, I
How's it
think
expressed
that
for you?
that makes a lot of sense. Especially with like because the Mars and Pisces, so the spirituality part of like always kind
Right,
of reality checking.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and also like very much so questioning when somebody comes off as like a spiritual person, like questioning that. So yeah, I could see that.
okay,
And the imposter syndrome as well, how you mentioned.
yeah,
I could definitely see that too.
okay, okay, all right. So, well, you know, so there you go. There's a possible way that could be expressing too. Does anybody else want to add anything?
I have a question
Okay.
because I've heard many times people equate Mars with seeking the truth,
Okay.
or does it have anything to do with Mars, the truth, or is that more Jupiter?
Um, at an esoteric level, Mars is more concerned with the truth. At You look at, when I say esoteric level, I'm talking about esoteric astrology. Esoteric astrology asserts this idea that when we first manifest, we manifest at the lowest level, which means that we only really care about our own survival and and then after survival, it's self-gratification. And then after self-gratification, then we're slowly moving up the spectrum, slowly moving our way up through the chakras until we're looking for higher and finer things, until the things that we're starting to look for start to create problems for us and start to create conflict around us. And that's when we start to go into spirituality more, because we can't please ourselves and still live the kind of lives that we want to live anymore. Mars is present at all parts of that. At the most basic physical level, Mars becomes probably the most important planet in that it rules our survival instincts. So our ability to defend ourselves, our ability to defend others, to fight, to stand up for ourselves, it rules that. And that's why it's connected to adrenaline and things like that. Mars is present at all levels, like all planets are at all levels of evolution. I've heard that saying too, but I think you know, Jupiter is a lot to do with growth and spirituality and truth and philosophy and things like that. But it tends to be a bit self-satisfied wherever it is. You drop it on the chart, it's pretty happy to just do its own thing over there and things like that. It's not till you start applying planets like Mars and things like that that you start to do something with that things. And again, too, we're talking about Mars as a planet of initiating, of starting, of doing. And like Lao Tzu said, you know, knowledge by itself achieves nothing. So maybe that's a way of looking at it. I don't know. You know.
So I have one more question. So
Okay.
where do we actually start? In Aries or where Mars is?
On the
Like if you want to start something.
well, Mars probably, but Aries is going to be an expression of that. You know, Mars will tell us how. And Aries will probably tell us where, you know, at the base level. So
Okay.
Yeah, and we look at, otherwise, if it was just Aries all the time, we'd all be out there kicking doors, taking names. You know what I mean? And it's just not like that at all. Some of us are perpetually having our door kicked down, and that could be everything to do with where our Mars is. You know what I mean? And how we deal with that after, how that makes us feel about ourselves and things like that. Mars isn't all just about being a bully. A lot of it is about being bullied, how we experience bullies. Esoterically, Mars on your chart can tell us where the bullies in our lives are coming from, you know, and what's motivating them and things like that too. You know, we talk about narcissism. It's such a big topic right now. Mars could be the doorway to narcissism on your chart. It could be. Not necessarily the planet itself, but it can be a part of, you know, how we unpack that. The question you asked me before, Gianna, if I really wanted to answer that, I'd sit down with you and I'd take 10 minutes to talk about your own life experiences. And how you experience anger. How is there a conflict between the way you spiritualize things and how you feel it in your gut and things like that? I'll try and understand those factors first. And it's the same with a Mars placement on the chart. But I'd start by talking to people. You know, are you a natural go-getter? You know, do you have goals? Depending on the evolution, esoterically of a person, how that Mars is expressing. Is completely different. Somebody at the base chakra level is just out there getting laid or fighting all the time. That's it. And we've seen them. We've probably even got people in our family that are like that. Everybody's got them. Everybody knows them. Everybody's probably gone out with them at one point. And, you know, the world's full of them. But that you can get that same Mars placement on somebody else's chart that's coming at a different level of consciousness, and that's a completely different animal. You know what I mean? So the questioning process obviously is a big part of it, you know, and how we build up. But does that answer your question? I think Mars will tell us how we initiate stuff, and Aries may tell us where we initiate, or
Yes,
aspects
my
to
hope.
Mars. Yeah, aspects to Mars too could also tell us where that Mars energy is being invested on the chart, or exactly why that Mars energy is not working the way it should. We might have a Neptune placement that's just diluting the whole process, or we have beliefs that we've come in that we've been taught growing up, you know, religious beliefs or philosophical beliefs that are dismantling our ability to start up and do things for ourselves. We could have fourth house stuff that's affecting our Mars, you know, a Saturn in fourth house square your Mars might be your father who just kept telling you you'll never be any good, you know, every day, you know, or you ruin everything you start. So, you know, and so you never really activate that Mars energy because that pressure's there stopping it from activating. And that's what I mean by it tells us it's Mars doesn't give us any superpowers. It just tells us where the superpower story begins. You know what I mean? For Peter Parker, it'll tell him exactly where that spider is that's going to bite him and give him whatever. But there's still a journey to get there. You know, while some people like that Frank I was talking about right at the beginning, that German guy I used to drink with, they just seem to be born with it by design. This inherent selfishness that's just built an incredible life for him, you know, and he never questions it. It feels like a gift, but at the same time, when you know what you know, living that way becomes impossible anyway. So, you know, it's pointless to even speculate about it. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Very much. You've taken me all different places with it, so thank you.
So that's just me rambling. Gianna, you had something to say?
Yeah, I actually had another, like, as you were talking, this thought
Yeah.
of and thinking about the square with my son, because my son is in Gemini. So, and Gemini, I believe I read rules like hands and nervous system.
Mm.
And not to be like kind of TMI, but so my Mars is in Pisces, and so I do feel very strong, like I think we've talked about it before as well. Like my psychic abilities, I
Yep.
feel are very strong, but they manifest in like physical form almost,
Yeah.
like where I'm feeling, especially with like my hands get, again, not to be TMI, but like a little very
Mm.
clammy when I'm in a circumstance where I'm feeling like the physical manifestation of something I'm thinking or like downloading. And I'm equating that to like the Gemini sun and how Gemini, like the ruler of like Mani, or like I guess in Latin, like Mani is hands or whatever. And
Mm.
like that, how that's manifesting physically for me, because I also would think about Mars being like a physical manifestation of something, like with the body almost. I don't know if like that's ever been talked about,
The
but
level you're talking about it. Mars is also connected to fire. It could be connected to Kundalini fire, the Antakarana, the movement of energy up through the body. So, and that fire, if it's, especially if it's spiritually you're connecting to it or you're pulling on it too early, it can create damage and you know what I'm talking about, sensations within the body too. I don't know, you know, it's again, it'd be able to be something we'd sit down and talk about, but maybe it's connected to Kundalini fire rising up. It might be rising up, you know what I mean?
yeah, like that rise. That's what I kind
Yeah,
of from like
yeah.
sacral chakra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like lightning in a lot of ways. You know, lightning starts from the clouds, but also the ground, and it's not the air striking the ground. It's the two meeting in the middle. It's negative and positive energy meeting in the middle. And sometimes when that energy is coming up, and while energy is coming down, say from a soul level and stuff like that, it can create all sorts of sensations. This is just, I'm passing on something that I learned in a class a long time ago. There's a lot of talk about Kundalini energy. I know there's a lot of yoga out there that works on cultivating and drawing that energy up, whether you're ready for it or not. And I know there's a connection between that and consciousness, spiritual consciousness, the building of the Antakarana, the Rainbow Bridge. So that's a lot of different stuff to unpack, but maybe there's some answers there for you as well. The fact that there's a square there may mean it's something that's self-regulating. You know, it's a way of self-regulating your own consciousness too. So I'd definitely look into that. Maybe Kundalini is a good place to start. Who knows?
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything? We're actually cruising through this at a pretty good rate, or at least this way I'm experiencing time. Yeah. All right. Mars aspects. So Mars conjunct. Mars intensifies. So when Mars is in conjunction to something, has a tendency to intensify it, make us experience it at a more visceral level, a more energic level. When Mars sextiles another planet, it's got make it so energy. It's a drive to create something. It's something that has not been created, that needs to be unlocked, that requires force or energy in order to deliver the benefits or action. You know what I mean? It's an opportunity on a chart in a lot of ways, inviting us to act. And if we do, it almost guarantees that it's going to pay dividends. When Mars trines something, strong will, easy action. And maybe this is that German guy I was drinking with down in Sydney. He might have these Mars trines going all over his chart. It just seems natural to him that he should be in charge. You know what I mean? It seems natural to him that he should get what he wants. It seems natural to him that if he's not getting what he wants, then he should go and take what he wants. More power to him. Mars aspects. When Mars squares something, it can represent a challenge focused. There's challenge there in order to complete something. A trial. There's work to be done in order to unlock something. So that, I don't know, maybe that's got some insight into what you're experiencing, Gianna. It sounds like there's a collision there between the physical and the mental. So there's some sort of schism there between the two, and you know, that's represented as a square. And sometimes just the very act of acting in itself creates that friction. When Mars is in opposition to something, it can represent power struggles within the self, power struggles with the world, and people around us. When Mars is in quincunx to another planet on the chart, it can represent misdirected energy, energy that we're investing into something that's not paying dividends, energy that we're investing into something that's creating conflict and creating unnecessary drama in our lives. That the more energy we put in, the more we seem to be getting in our own way. So that may be what that represents on the chart as well. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about aspects? Any aspects of their own that may fall into one of these patterns?
I have a question.
Okay.
For example, Mars dignity. I have Mars in Cancer, so it's in its fall, I believe.
Yeah.
yeah. How do you what's the remedy? Because it's like instead of asserting oneself, I just, you could just fall into tears, or it's like anger directed towards family or whatever. I mean, I got Mars conjunct the moon in Cancer, so it's
things
not
like this,
healthy.
things like this, I tend to fall back on esoteric astrology because that offers the idea that we're here to achieve something. You know what I mean? That there is a bigger picture and things like that too. So this trap or whatever is part of it. And I think that's, when you've got purpose, because I think Mars in its fall in Cancer is a really tough placement because it's as strong as Mars is supposed to be, but it's in the wrong place. So it's just doing, you know what I mean? And man, my first
I've got to
girlfriend
go
had,
for that.
yeah, her family were volatile. God, they used to fight all the time. And
True.
yeah, every time we had they had like, birthdays were the worst because everybody would sit down, they're all happy, they all got smiles on their faces, but they're all waiting for shit to go down. And 9 times out of 10, it was her who started it. She'd say one thing and then everybody would explode. They'd all go off their room, slamming doors and all that sort of stuff. Um, there's no remedy for it. There's just, you've got to accept that that's part of the bigger picture, and you go look for that bigger picture. I'm not telling you it's hopeless. But I'm not telling you it's the end of the world at the same time too. There's a bigger story. There's a bigger picture. Esoterically,
Yeah.
there's an experience that you chose. You're already the black sheep of your family, from what I understand.
Yes.
So exactly. So you've already been investing energy in that anyway. Whether you had decided to become an astrologer or not, you probably would have ended up with that. But would you have been an astrologer if you didn't have that? Maybe that's a way of looking at it, because it doesn't sound like it's something that's aligned to the way your family think or do things, Maybe that's how Mars was supposed to play out for you. You were supposed to give you the drive to go out and become an astrologer, become a tarot reader and do all those things that may drive some people in your family nuts.
You just read my whole chart.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool.
They don't like that I'm doing chart and astrology.
Great. And thriving while you're doing it too. It must drive people. That's the worst thing, isn't it? Isn't that the worst thing when you're telling someone, don't do that? No, that's stupid. You're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to be broke, and then they go out and they do well. Isn't that the worst? Because then you start having to ask yourself, what am I doing with my life? So it's the best kind of revenge too, if you're revenge minded.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on aspects and placements and things like that?
I have a Mars square
I was-
Pluto.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Michael.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to comment on Antoinette's placement that she just talked about, and what I was thinking was like Cancer for me is associated with nurturing, and so you've got your moon conjunct your Mars, so it's almost like it's your goal to allow yourself to nurture, like take action in nurturing your own needs, regardless of what they.
It's a beautiful way of looking at it.
Yes. I never thought of it that way. Thank you very much.
She's older
I'm
and
sorry.
wiser.
I had to look at my chart. I forgot what was going on in my chart. I got Mars opposing Neptune and my moon in my 5th house. So my Mars is in Gemini, the 5th house, and my Neptune and moon is in Sagittarius, the 5th house. So like I was thinking, like I got this whole creative thing going on. But like I don't really put it out to people, like in my groups. I don't know. I really don't know.
Mars and Gemini, just at the face level, can also be energy that's just going everywhere.
Yes, that's how I feel. But I feel like when it comes time to show my creativity, I don't, because I was always told that when I was younger, my friends used to always say, I don't have no talent, I don't have no, I ain't creative or anything. I believe that. So I just feel like I don't care. But now I do, and it's just like it's hard to even put it out there sometimes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. What would you say?
Well, I'd start there. It sounds like it could be a lot of energy that's going in every direction, but not a specific direction. Um,
Mhm.
it could be exactly what you're saying too, especially with that moon energy. Was it your mother who told you you weren't creative,
No, it
or
was
was she the one who
my,
nurtured it? Because it's in your fifth
it was
house.
it was in my group of friends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like all the time. Because I did things different. I was really different from everybody. Dressed different. I mean, just a lot of stuff, and they just never. They always reminded me of it. And they just like, you ain't got no style and stuff like that. And it
The
kind of
more you
stuck
say
with
that,
me.
though, the more it sounds like the opposite. I mean, if you're dressing different and doing everything different to everybody else, you're incredibly creative. You know, though they're not criticizing your creativity, it's your ability to follow the the
Hmm.
the laws or the rules around you. That's really what they're
Yes.
challenging. So maybe it's you need to go back and look at that. That sounds like a core belief. You know, you've picked up from some other source that isn't doesn't belong to you. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So,
Hmm.
and we all got those. God knows. Yeah,
What about the moon? What would you think about the moon?
the moon in the fifth house.
Yeah, opposing my morals. Like my emotion is not balanced with my energy.
It could
Is
be.
that how you?
That's a fire and water pattern. You know, you could be burning yourself out. You could be canceling yourself out. You know what I mean? And we're talking about
Definitely do
emotionally
that.
and physically. You know, that can, at the very base level, can just be doubt. You know what I mean? At the most fundamental level, it can be doubt created by two opposing ideas of who you are and what you're capable of. You know,
Yeah.
I, oppositions. Look, I'm a coward when it comes to oppositions. I go and find other aspects that are going to let me work with the things that I want. Oppositions by themselves are too hard to work with. So I'm a high functioning lazy person. So I look for where I can get the best results with the
I feel
least
like
amount of effort. You know what I mean? And sure, that frees you up to do other stuff, and then that opposition, wow, you know, it kind of takes care of itself, doesn't it? I don't know. That's not a solution. I'm aware of that, but maybe that's the way to work with it. Oppositions by themselves. I mean, unless you've got a tremendous amount of energy, and I suspect that you do, can be a lot of work to take on. So yeah, maybe that's the lesson of
sometimes
oppositions.
it's all in my head though.
Yeah.
Right.
More often
I
than
can
not, if you
feel
look
that.
around, you're going to find there's a way to connect those two. The opposition's separating them at the moment, but there may be other connections on the chart. They may share a planet in a more positive aspect, or they might be in T square to another planet. And if that's the case, go work with that planet. And that will alleviate pressure on both ends. But oppositions just tend to create pressure, and that creates a lot of work. Yeah. Did you have a question, Michael? You want something you wanted to say?
I was just gonna say I've got Mars square Pluto.
Okay.
Pluto is in the 12th house and Mars is in the third house.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
How's that expressing for you?
Yeah, it's a challenge every day.
Do you close your eyes and visualize a world blowing up or something like that with a civilization
Yeah,
on
you
it?
know, it's very interesting that you say that because I do have catastrophic thinking a lot, and I tell my husband, well, I don't tell him about it very often because I don't want him to think I'm too crazy, but you know, like we'll be somewhere and like on the road or something, I'm at a stop sign and there will be a car coming and the car's, you know, just driving along, but then I'll have a vision of the car going off the road and like slamming into us and us bursting
Wow.
into flames and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, so that happens. And I think that has something to do with my Mars and Pluto placement because I don't get anxiety from it. It's just I have like a brief like vision of what could happen if the worst were going to happen. And I think it comes from when I was a kid. I remember riding with my dad, and he would always say, uh, he would say something like, "Be careful, I'm on the bloody side," you know, when I would drive.
Hmm.
And I
Wow.
think that kind of stuck in my
Sure.
head. He was being funny, but you know, and so I do have catastrophic thinking. That is something that
Wow.
I do work with a lot.
That's interesting.
I have to work.
Yeah.
You should have a look at the director Michael Bay's chart too, because everything in his movie careens off the road and explodes and all of that too. He might have the same placement. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
have
It
to
just get
say,
expressed in a completely different way. So yeah,
Yeah, I've
yeah,
always thought like that, and I don't usually say anything about it, you know,
sure.
because people look at me like I am like crazy, And you know what? We grew up, speaking of Generation X, do you remember when we were kids? I think we were around, I was around 6 when Drew Barrymore did the movie The Firestarter. That was
Right.
one of the first
Stephen
movies.
King one, yeah.
Yes, that was one of the first movies I remember seeing as a kid, and I just loved it. I was like, this is so cool. So I think all that kind of programs us into who we are, as we evolve.
It could
Thinking
just
about
be
it.
reaching out to your own inner pyromaniac as well, So,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I got another story we won't go into. But yeah, I mean that was when I was like 6. There was an incident where there was fire involved, and I was the ringleader. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So yeah, so I do see that's another manifestation that's interesting that you bring up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay, let's go to client work. We're almost there. So, as we talked about, Mars represents anger on the chart. Sometimes working with clients who are struggling with anger, it's helpful to make a distinction between healthy and unhealthy anger. Does anybody have their own framework for what that is? Healthy and unhealthy anger?
I want to say, like, you have your reasonable anger, and then you have that anger that's just very explosive. Where you could barely say something and somebody just snap, or when they do snap, they snap. Now, what I did here, and I kind of did some research, was Mars in Cancer, and even in the air sign, Gemini, because Mars doesn't like the water. It's like a general in the kitchen, and my sister, she always was talking about she hated her anger, like the way she was very explosive. This before I even started studying astrology. She has her Mars in Cancer as well, but it also makes you passive aggressive and things too. When she blows, she blows. So I think it's like unreasonable type of anger where.
Absolutely. Healthy anger at the most basic level is anger where you're standing up for yourself, where you're defending yourself, where you're making a valid point that's not at the expense or the injury of somebody else. Things like that. Asserting your right to something when it's a genuine right and not entitlement. That's a tough thing for a lot of people to unpack. Unhealthy anger is anger that's designed to hurt other people. Anger that's designed to create instability around you, so you're the only stable element in the room. Unhealthy anger is anger that's designed to hurt or destroy. That serves no practical purpose. Gianna.
I also see unhealthy anger as like not being able to move forward when someone has a goal and they have had this goal or this vision for like years, months, whatever, and like the frustration like prohibits them from making any progress.
Sure. I can see that, and that's an internal burning, seething anger. That can be like a resentment.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting word because for a lot of people, when they're unable to express anger or unable to express themselves in a situation long enough, that anger turns to resentment. And for me, when you get to the resentment stage, whatever it is pretty much over. It's way more work to sort, to unpack. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's the volatile anger, then there's the passive aggressive anger. There's different types of anger, and people use those. They've got their own tool set when it comes to controlling other people. The withdrawing of affection in its way can be a form of anger too. Things like that. Consciously playing games that are designed to hurt other people too. Sometimes other planets are involved, but that's it. But that's again too. There's if it's something that's happening at that level, then sure, absolutely. Okay. Look at ways of channeling and directing anger. What we were talking about before, Crystal, when you've got an opposition to Mars, especially when it's pointing off to something as sensitive as the moon, that can be really, really difficult to work with. But like I said, if you can find another planet that is circumventing or de-escalating that energy on the chart, or you look at the house that that Mars is ruling, where that is and things like that, that's an opportunity to at least to drive your alarm levels down. And to alleviate pressure, at least in one point of that, and things tend to flow. If they can't work together, then they can work around each other. Find a way to do that. Uh, and sometimes that's a way of channeling and directing anger. If your anger is very specific, and for you it might be directed, for example, at emotions, and it may be expressing as frustration because those two don't, it just end up grinding on each other, then find somewhere else. And it may be creativity by extension, just by being creative, you're not so angry anymore, you know. And I'm not assigning anger to you as an emotion, but I'm just talking in a general sense if we were talking with or working with a client. You know, and you'd have the whole chart to look at. And again, you'd have the client as a resource. You ask them, you know, I'd look at that Mars, I'd look at the aspects, positive aspects that are running off to it. I'd start talking about those.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So when you're in like Aries and Mars, do you do Scorpio and Pluto too, or you just do one or the other?
I tend to work with the planets out, and then the houses where the planets end up. I don't tend to start from houses unless somebody's coming with a very specific question. Then I look at what's in that house, I look at the planets, and I start working up from those planets. Me, I tend to work more from the planets, and then the houses support that. That's my style. But it, again,
I'm
too,
sorry.
Sorry?
I guess I'm asking is, do you use Mars planetary ruler over Scorpio and Aries?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Generally, like the big three, your client tends to identify with one more than the other. You know, either Pluto or Mars. But even like we've been talking about right from the beginning, I believe even on a societal level, those two planets are connected. You know, there's enough of a connection that when Pluto was discovered, somebody said, "Oh yeah, that belongs to Scorpio." So there's definitely enough energy. You know, that actually probably does a better job of explaining a lot of Scorpio. But you do meet those Scorpios that don't want to kill you. And you know, they're generally working with Mars. They don't want to kill you. They just want to rough you up a bit, you know. So you know, that might be the way. But yes, definitely. Okay, conflict management. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say my youngest is an Aries and a Scorpio moon and rising. Yeah, I know all about it.
Yep. Okay. Everyone around you does too, Crystal. House and sign placement. These give an idea for good conflict management strategies, and that's just building off the anger there. You know, so if you actually want to look at, I'm evidence-based, being an air sign. I look for evidence on the chart. So I look for placements that support healthy expressions of anger and things like that. I question the client about it, and then I reinforce it. So, you know, when the client says something contradictory to that, I remind them, but you've got this over here. You know what I mean? So that's what you need to be working with in order to do that. And you've done it enough times now that you can see that it works. So invest energy in it, you know, develop it and grow it. Now, when your client comes to you with questions about Mars and relationships, sexuality and physicality, they can be certainly any client who comes to you with questions about those, that can be, you know, Mars is probably the place I'd start. Whether it's physical violence, whether it's you know, sexuality at any level, unless it's more psychological and things like that. At a physical level, you know, when somebody comes to you with something physical, physical related and things like that, Mars is a great place to start. It's a great place to begin a dialogue. Assertiveness, either people who are too assertive, healthily assertive, or not assertive enough. Mars is your best point to start. You know what I mean? And the best example of these are people who come in and endlessly complain about the same things but don't really do anything about it. So go look for that Mars and light a fire under it. So you, at the very least, they're telling new stories each time you see them. And developing Mars energy. If somebody wants to develop Mars energy more, to build up their fire levels within their body and their personality, get into sports and get them going to the gym. Get them, you know what I mean? They say healthy body, healthy mind. I believe that. I don't know if I'm the poster child for it, but you know what I mean? There's a definite connection. You know, when you go out, you go for a walk for an hour, or you go out in the gym like that, you always feel like at the end you feel amazing and you swear you're going to do it every day just to get that feeling back again. That's a great place to start cultivating Mars energy, even if it's just the energy to initiate. You know, like they say, what is it? It takes 21 days for something to become a habit. You know, even just do something simple. And I've heard people describe it as a 5%. Find yourself a 5%. It may be just doing a 10-minute workout every morning. It may just be 10 press-ups. and things like that. But do it every day, and then let that process take care of itself until it becomes part of your muscle memory. And that's where Mars lives, at that level. So that's a great place to start. And also, if there's too much Mars energy in a person's chart, look for Earth on their chart. Look for ways that they can ground themselves. And also look at meditation if they've got the attention span for it. And if they don't, then, well, it's probably just going to make the process worse. So question your client, talk to them. You'll learn from talking to your client how they answer questions, how they focus, all of that sort of stuff, whether that's a good suggestion for you, And if you're not doing that, it's really, really basic stuff. But if you're working with clients and you're not paying attention to your clients' traits, you're missing out on the biggest gold mine of information of working on clients. Clients say one thing, it probably makes up 30% of what they say. The other 70% is what their body and their face and their expressions and their word choices and all of that other stuff is telling you. And that's the stuff where the truth tends to lie. And that's how you'd make a call, at least at the very least, on meditation. If the person can't sit still, then meditation's not for them. Don't go there. Does anybody have any questions about this? Anything they want to raise? Any experiences they have? Any disagreements with anything that's on there? You're quite welcome. Fire away. Okay.
I have a question. If
Okay.
if Mars, because in the beginning of the session you spoke about Mars being the male energy, how can we see the female energy from Mars, or do we always have to go to Venus? Or like,
now probably more than ever, that's a tougher question to answer. I don't even know if we're comfortable just assigning things off as being male or female anymore. When we talked about Venus last time, that actually came through as a better framework for me. It's either going to be about how we actualize ourselves, how authentic we are to ourselves, or how willing we are to work with other people and our attachments to other people. And things like that. For me, that sort of works as a more comfortable spectrum. Masculine energy is complicated now. It's very, very complicated now. And so is feminine energy, and it's political too. God, it's the fastest way to get cancelled. Just ask J.K. Rowling. But, or become I don't know. I saw photos of Iman Khalif this morning, taken, glamour photos. I thought, gee, that looks like Caitlyn Jenner. So, you know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, we're talking about the ability to assert the self or the group and where they are on the spectrum of that. That's what it feels like to me. And there's a lot, ever since, God, this whole diva movement started. When was that? Back in the 90s? I think there's been a lot of women very, very comfortable with self energy. And that's really, really fed an industry, and that's really empowered, for want of a better word. A lot of other women have jumped on that bandwagon, or that's triggered their own inner authority, and they've followed that. So I think all I've done is really avoid your question. But what are your thoughts? Yes.
I was wondering if the Amazons would have been examples of the feminine Mars energy.
That's a really, really interesting question. If you ever read the 12 Trials of Hercules from the Lucas Trust, it's part of the Esoteric Library. It talks about Hercules going through 12 trials, and every one of those trials represents a sign. And Hippolyte, the queen of the Amazons, she represents Virgo. And she fought Hercules. She wasn't physically strong enough to withstand him, and he killed her. And he had a lot of remorse for it. But I read information. I read some quotes after that talked about that the Amazons were the blueprint of femininity before the rise of Christianity, before the rise of parochialism and patriarchy, before Christianity rose up and said, God's not around us, God's up there far away and we need to approach him on our knees. Before that, the Amazons were the female archetype. And I wish to this day that I'd remembered where I'd read that. And in a lot of ways, I think Lilith is connected to that. A lot of ways, I think the expression we're seeing the rise of Mars energy now is it's not new energy that's being learned. It's old energy that's being remembered. That's what it feels like to me. Um, and I don't normally talk about astrology from a feeling level, but that was one thing that I read and I understood. I grew up around a very powerful. I don't know if anybody's seen a woman haka, Māori haka, women do a haka. I grew up around that. I'm a Kiwi. I'm a Maori by descendancy. So women in my family and my experience growing up have always been very powerful. And that just felt normal and right to me when I read that. So yeah, I think so. I think the Amazons and Mars energy, I think there's a very, very strong connection to that. And I think, before Christianity and a lot of these other patriarchy systems came up, most indigenous cultures, a good many early cultures, they were all matriarchies. Has anybody been to Indonesia? If you go to, it's not Aceh, it's the north of Sumatra. You see those houses, they got the big roofs that go up like that. It begins with A. Indonesia is a Muslim country, but that region, and Sumatra is a tough island to be on. The people are very, very tough. But that region is a matriarchy. It's undisputed. And you meet the women there, and they are so powerful and so calm. And they stand out as soon as you see them. Their eyes, they're not hard. Their eyes seem soft, but when they look at you, they look right through you. And they are the most incredible women. My brother-in-law married one. His life's just never been the same since. First thing she did was convert him to Islam. Yeah, they're a very, very powerful society, and the women are at the helm of that. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Aboriginal culture, if a man is no longer able to hunt, his wife, they have what's called a widow's spear. The wife will use the spear to run him through, finish him, and then she'll go to the next hut and challenge that woman for her man. So it's something that's been alive for a long time. It's just been since the Dark Ages that the clock got turned right back. Yeah. Does that answer, at least throw some light on that? Was that Rowan who asked that question?
It was, and thank you. Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that. It's an Aquarius, I guess I've never really subscribed to gender roles anyway. But I think I wish to this day I remember where I read that, because it feels to me a lot of this rise in female Mars energy is it's more a reclaiming and a remembrance than it is a reinvention. Maybe there's a reason why men stood up and drove you all down. You were tyrants. So just ask anybody who's been divorced. So moving on. Manifesting Mars. Tuesday is Mars's day. Tur, the Norse god of war, or Thor. That's his day. Oh no, actually Thor's day, Thursday. Tur, I think he's the Gaelic god. I'm not sure. But Tuesday, if you want to do a meditation, if you've got a little shrine, and we've talked about a shrine or an altar before in every one of these. If you want to be cultivating Mars energy or working with it, whether that's rising it up, whether that's calming it down, and maybe calming it down might be something you're looking at, Gianna. I don't know. You might be having an excess of Mars energy. I'm not sure. You'd have to really, really explore that. That might be a way to negotiate and work with that. Red, scarlet, and black. Anything you put on that shrine, anything you wear, that's red. Scarlet, which is a much deeper red, a blood red, or black is a connection to Mars energy as well. If you're looking for something in your house to convey or encapsulate Mars energy, a weapon, any sort of weapon, a sword, a spear, anything like that, whether it's a full-size one, whether it's a small one, or a rifle like I think Sandra's got, that's Mars energy. So that's all there. And fire, a fireplace, even a candle, having candles on your altar. Every time you're lighting a candle, in a way you're invoking Mars energy, which is action energy. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. For every magic spell that you cast, it's an exchange of energy. It's a creation of energy and a channeling of energy. And fire is a conduit for that. Birthstones for Mars are ruby, obsidian, garnet, and tiger's eye. So getting one of those and putting those on your altar is a way to anchor that energy too. The good news is there's something at every budget level along there too, if you have a look. So, you know, you don't have to break the bank to get some Mars energy going. And the flowers are red roses, hibiscus, and poppies. So those 3 flowers, there's a few others as well, but those 3 flowers will get you there. They will definitely get some Mars energy flowing in your life. And anything that's made of iron or steel has a connection to Mars. So again, if somebody's trying to cultivate or focus their Mars energy, then that's a great way to do it. Really simple, great way to channel Mars energy is the classic samurai or Bushido skill: get a sword, go outside, 100 downward strikes a day. It's a really, really good way to build up that Mars energy and focus it and direct it. You know, you can use a wooden sword if you like, or if you're feeling particularly brave and you want to build up some muscles, and get a steel one and do it that way too. And that's us. That's everything. How did we do? Any thoughts, questions, anything anybody wants to add there? I feel like we covered a lot of ground, actually.
I found that last section quite hilarious because obviously we talked a lot in my reading about lack of energy and where to find it, and literally
you've got everything on that list.
Well, Oscar, like he makes knives. He works with metal. He's obsessed with fire, and
he's taking all your Mars energy, all your energy.
He
That's
is
what's happening.
all my Mars energy. I've got hibiscus trees growing in the garden, so at least that's my bit. He's always been obsessed with obsidian and tiger's eye and garnet actually too. Oh my God, I need to look at where Mars is on his chart. He is Mars.
He is Mars. He's the god of war.
He is the god of war.
Yeah. Oh my God. There you go. And you just you're his squire.
Oh,
you're carrying his sword.
I miss Merlin. We've just been watching Merlin.
Okay, the old TV series. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was actually really, really fun. Yeah, I guess I miss Merlin.
yeah, it looks that way. Oh well. This,
there we go.
At least you know. At least you know. Yeah. You're Podrick, you know, and he's Gwendolyn Christie. Yeah.
Oh God.
Did anybody else have any thoughts? Anything they want to add? Anything they want to wrap up with?
You know I do, Damon.
Go for it.
I was you didn't touch much on the whole Mars and the female chart, what the Mars represents. Find that to be true because I discovered the same thing, and I looked and it seemed true to me. But it threw me off a little bit because I was always told that it was the 7th house and everything. So when I seen it, I was like, hold on. So I started to check charts and stuff. And if I found it to be true because mine is in Gemini, and I'm attracted to people intellectual. Like I don't really care that much what you look like. I mean, you got to be easy on the eyes a little bit though. But I need to be learning something, communicating. Like my sister got cancer, likes sensitive. So what did you think?
Sorry, you kept dropping out through there. You're talking about Mars as a point of attraction?
Yes.
What
do you think about
female? I look, anytime we do something like this, I'm not going to talk at length or on authority about how a female might experience something in authority because I simply can't. You know, it's like me talking about pregnancy. You know, you're going to feel a pressure or something. You don't want to. You know what I mean? What do I know? What can I talk about? I can only talk about my own subjective experiences as a third party and things like this too. So I guess I tend to not generalize, but find different ways of expressing that. So you know what I mean? And I think especially for Mars too. I mean, we talked right at the beginning. That book was written by Sasha Fenton, who's quite well regarded. And it wasn't the only thing she had to say about Mars. But I do remember a time where attraction was what was assigned to a female from a Mars point of view. I've been a male around females long enough to know that Mars is something alive and well in every female I've ever met. So I think maybe it'll give an indication of masculine energy that women are drawn to, but it may also give an indication of masculine energy that they already possess. Maybe it's just a little more general than that, and maybe attraction is just a more drilled down version of that. You know what I mean? There's always that talk that we're looking for our other half, which is makes no sense to me. But you know what I mean? We're looking for more completeness, and we find that in other people. If we had it in ourselves, we wouldn't need it in somebody else. So maybe it's as simple as that. If I'm understanding your question, like I said, you did drop out quite a bit during that.
Yeah, I was just wanting to know if you found the same interpretation to be true.
Well, I can't speak for women. If I look at Venus on my chart as an indicator of what I'm attracted to in women, mine's in the 7th house, but it's in Capricorn. And I don't know, it's never quite sat right with me. At the end of the day, I guess I probably rebel against the idea that that's the be all and end all of romance for me. Maybe I'm looking for bigger things. That's just an expression of it. So I think it's a very, very subjective question. When you sit and your best way of working that one out is to sit down and talk with your client. My guess is you sit down and you talk to 100 clients and ask them exactly the same question. You'll get correlation, but you'll get a lot of difference as well. So I think it's a personal one.
Okay.